When I was in elementary school, I would walk to school every morning. I'd usually walk with my older brother, since at the time I was much too young to walk alone. Every day when we passed by an apartment complex that was about a block or two away from school grounds, there was a man that always stood in a bathrobe, which always gave me a weird vibe, but it never raised any suspicion because it was early in the morning, and my brother and I always just assumed he was watching over his son or daughter as he sent them off to school. He always wore a brown bathrobe and was about 5'7" in height with short brown hair and looked like he was in his late 40s. He always stood in the same window or on the balcony every morning at 7:30 a.m., watching all the children, including me and my brother, walking up the hill to school. This had gone on for a few months before other kids started to notice him standing there watching. Soon after, parents started to notice, since kids started mentioning it to their parents. A yellow warning letter was sent home to make sure you walk to and from school with a guardian or sibling, and reminding us basic rules about stranger danger and our safety, that kind of stuff. Other than that, the school couldn't do much to stop the man from standing eerily in his window, watching everyone. I remember like it was yesterday, the terrifying crack our PA system made when it came on to the usual morning announcements and our national anthem. As always, we were all just talking, laughing, and joking, like kids do during announcements, until our anthem started playing, so we all went quiet and stood up, but midway through it cut out. We all started laughing out of confusion, but a few seconds later of silence, a frantic voice came through the PA system and yelled, "This is a lockdown, code red, code red. This is not a drill, we are in lockdown." I could see the color drain out of my teacher's face as she rushed to lock all the doors, shut all the curtains, and turn off all the lights, and huddled us behind her desk. We waited and waited. We heard distant yells from a person coming down the hallway. It was getting closer and closer until it was right out front of our classroom door. The handle started shaking slightly, and then violently, we heard a man's voice begin screaming. We tried to stay quiet, but many kids started crying and sobbing for their parents. Unfortunately, this made the man outside of the door more violent and saying things like, little pigs, let me in," or "House of straw and house of brick." This went on for about 10 minutes until one loud bang, followed by a thud noise. Silence fell over all of us, and from beneath the door, we could see what looked like blood pooling, slowly forming a half circle. We stayed in our classroom until the PA system said, "The lockdown is now lifted." The police arrived and brought us out through the windows. I'm guessing there was something on the other side of the door that they didn't want us to see. A week later, an article in the paper was released about the lockdown, since back then TV and news coverage wasn't really a big thing in my town. They showed a picture of the man, and a cold spike shot through my body. It was the same man my brother and I had saw every day on our way to school, standing in the window in his bathrobe. He was shot dead by our school security guard. The man was wielding a large hunting knife and something that looked to be an explosive, a pipe bomb of some sort. The police raided his apartment soon after and found photos of children taken on our school grounds and hundreds of hours of videos involving children doing things I'm not comfortable with going into detail about. The man also had a restraining order that stated he was not allowed within a certain distance of school grounds, which leads me to wonder, how did he get a place so close to our school, and why on earth did he always wear a bathrobe? I'm older now, and when you put two and two together, you'll experience the same ill feeling I still get to this day. I'm very happy I'm not in school anymore. I graduated a few years ago, but more and more, every day, I hear about incidents at school, on the news, on the internet, all sorts of horror stories. But the stories online are the ones I always find myself glancing through. I've seen stories online of people relating how their school went into lockdown, and the story ends up being about some hobo who had been living under the school, or some crazy person down the street who had finally snapped one day. I don't know if they're true, but all I know is, our school went into lockdown once. I don't even know if the people at my school know the whole story as to what happened. I don't even know if I understand it myself. It still seems like sort of a fever dream, something that didn't really happen, couldn't happen. It was the middle of third period, math. I had just finished a big test, and I used the hall pass to go use the bathroom. Unfortunately, the school's bathrooms were all located at the stairwells, and of course, the bathroom on the first floor was undergoing repairs. I had to go up to the second floor, but before I got there, the bell rang. The bell never rang during class before, but as it did, an announcement came over the PA. Students and faculty, we are entering lockdown. This is not a drill. Please, all students and faculty, follow all school procedures. I froze. I could hear sirens approaching. I came out of the stairwell, but already the doors in the hallway were closing, and I could hear them locking. I was alone, and out in the open. I could go into the bathrooms now, but the doors had no locks. They removed the ability to lock them due to a bullying issue earlier that year. If there was somebody wandering the school, I'd have no chance if I went into there. I ran down the hall. I could see the classrooms turning out their lights and covering the windows. I couldn't turn to them for help. All instructions said not to answer the door. I had to find a safe place nearby before something happened. I turned the corner and I saw my chance. The janitor's closet was open. Lunch was up next period, so he was probably out setting up tables when the announcement was made. He wasn't in there, and it could easily be locked from the inside, so I jumped in and shut off the light. The only light I saw was from beneath the bottom of the door. I waited, and the sirens grew closer and eventually stopped. Time passed, and I wasn't sure if I was happy that I couldn't hear anything going on, or tense because I had no idea what was happening. Then I heard footsteps, lots of them. They stopped in the hallway. It must have been the police. I could hear radios and other distorted noises. I didn't think it would be some sort of lone gunman or nutcase, so I listened. Yes, sir. We know the suspect is here in the building. C team is across the campus, as ordered, and B team is covering the back entrances. You will not exit the building, on our watch. The chief responded, Good. Remember, he could look like anyone, but he must not escape. It's my fault he's here, and it's my duty to deal with him. I couldn't hear much for a while. There was too much movement, too many people all talking to each other to make out anybody from where I sat. I just waited for a while. Maybe it would all be over soon, and I could leave the closet and go back to class. Then, that's where it all happened. The chief yelled out, Hold it. Put your hands in the air. The commotion outside stopped abruptly. A moment later, it sounded like a large number of guns were being drawn. Lay down on the ground. Leave your hands where we can see them. I heard guns cocking. I said, Down on the ground. Don't you dare try to do what I think you're going to do. You're not at the institute anymore. I thought I would hear gunshots go off, back and forth, and eventually somebody saying, Suspect down. What I didn't expect was the scream. It wasn't a normal scream. It wasn't somebody crying out in terror. It was like a wounded animal, mixed with the sound of a bandsaw hitting concrete. I've never heard anything like it before, and I hope I never hear it again. The guns began to fire. The horrible scream happened. I saw the shadows underneath the door as people moved and fell over, and I heard the telltale splatter of gore as it soaked the floor. There was another gunshot, and I nearly yelled out myself when the bullet punched through part of the door. It wasn't very big, but I put my eye up against it, and I could see a group of people being attacked by something. But something wasn't right about him. He looked too long in places, like he had been stretched in a taffy machine. He was moving so fast that I couldn't make anything out, except for him grabbing people and throwing them around like they were nothing. There was blood everywhere, more gunshots, and then the screams happened again. I pulled away from the bullet hole and sat back in the closet. Then the screams began to fade. I heard a thud, and then more footsteps. The chief spoke again, but he was breathing heavily, like he had been badly wounded. A-team, he's down. I repeat, he's down. We need cleanup immediately. I didn't move. I wanted to look again, but as curious as I was, I didn't really want to see. But I heard a lot of commotion for a long time, and then nothing. I don't know how long it was after that, but then the PA announced the lockdown had ended. I came out of the closet. I tried not to look, but for all the sounds I had heard, there was not much sight of a fight, as I thought there would have been. Even the blood I had seen in a brief time had disappeared, as well as the bullet holes had all been removed. I went back to my class, and just told everyone I had hidden a stall in the bathroom. People were impressed with my guts for doing it. But it seemed that nobody else had heard the scream. I certainly didn't want to bring it up. As you might expect, we all went home early that day. Police and ATMs were everywhere, but as far as I could see, nobody was being taken away by either. My parents came, and they were so happy that I was alright. They had been following everything on the news, and came as soon as they could. At home that night, I ate dinner and waited to see what had happened on the news. The live coverage had ended a long time ago, but when the news came back on at 10 p.m., I wanted to see everything as it started. I saw classes had been canceled for the rest of the week, but the things started to get weird. The news talked about a student who they refused to name, and how he had come into the school armed, but was taken into custody after a short firefight. In the footage of the hallway where the scuffle had taken place, the door of the closet which had been my refuge was totally unscathed. Not so much as even a scratch on it, let alone bullet holes. It appeared to have been replaced outright, well before any investigation could have been complete. I saw pictures of the student being led away in cuffs. He didn't even have a mark on him. He wasn't even wounded, as they pushed him into the police car and drove away. All I saw was him yelling and fighting. Even in my glimpse through the bullet hole, I knew that wasn't the same one I saw. The clothes were completely different. The one I had seen had been wearing a black t-shirt and jeans, and the one getting in the police car was wearing a white t-shirt and shorts. The news said no one had been hurt despite the gunfire, but I know people had been wounded, even killed. I'd heard them screaming in agony as something viciously had attacked them. Then there was what that chief guy had said, talking about something being his fault, and the institution, and that he could look like anyone. I don't know what happened that day for certain. I didn't see enough. I didn't hear enough to get the full story. But this is what I can tell you. I know there was no shooter at our school. I know that someone was arrested that day. Someone who I didn't know, who I never heard about ever again. That's right. A shooter who had never made a day's worth of news ever again. Just disappeared. When was the last time that ever happened? I know that chief guy and his squad were not cops. I don't know who they were, but I know cops don't clean up a crime scene like that. No human being has ever screamed like that. Ever. But whatever it was that I heard attacking those people, all I know is, it came into that hallway where I was alone, and if I hadn't been there in the janitor's closet, I wouldn't have been saved.
I left my body down on her knees over the bedside, watching you breathe.